أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يمنون عليك أن أسلموا قل لا تمنوا علي إسلامكم بل الله يمن عليكم أن هداكم للإيمان إن كنتم صادقين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. First and foremost, before we begin tonight's talk, I want to take a moment to congratulate all of our dear brothers and sisters on the beloved birth of two of these holy characters, our beloved Prophet and Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhima. Aloud salawat, please. The topic that we'll be discussing tonight, inshallah, are the practical differences between the life of an atheist and a Muslim. Let us begin our discussion from here. The reality is that most of us look at the religion of Islam as a burden more so than a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you were to go to the average Muslim and ask the average Muslim what does it mean for him to be a Muslim, he will give you a list of do's and don'ts. He will give you a list of rules and regulations that he has to live his life by. A lot of these rules and regulations are built around restrictions. Everyone else can dress however they want to. Everyone else can consume whatever they like. Everyone else can attend any type of gathering that they're like. But you as a Muslim have a number of restrictions and rules and regulations built around your life. Therefore, you and I, for the most part, look at Islam as a burden in our lives. The reality is, if we want to commemorate these two holy characters on this special night, we have to change our perspective on Islam being a burden and change it more so into Islam being a blessing. Because only when we understand and appreciate the message that the Prophet brought to us and how much of a blessing it is in our lives, will we then appreciate the sacrifices that he made for us. If I look at Islam as a burden, I always look at the Prophet as someone who went through these difficulties, but at the end of the day, he didn't positively impact my life. But if I look at the religion as a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a blessing that positively impacts my life, well then I'm thankful to this Prophet through going through all the sacrifices that he went through in order to get this message to you and I. The message of Islam being a blessing for the people of the time of the Prophet is very clear. When the Prophet came, with the message of Islam, the Arab of that time, were nobodies. They came from a land that was empty of all civilization. They came from a land that was empty of natural resources. They came from a land that was not even considered a power to be reckoned with. Fast forward until the end of the life of our Holy Prophet, and all of a sudden, this Arabian Peninsula was unified. It had turned into a power that needed to be reckoned with. This is how Islam was a blessing for these individuals. But the question is, for you and I living in the 21st century, thousands of years later, how is Islam a blessing in our lives today? How does Islam impact our lives positively today? If I came across a person, as I do in society every other day, a person who doesn't believe in Islam, a person who might even be an atheist, how is his life practically different from my life? What are the differences between his life and my life? Someone might say, well, this atheist doesn't believe in Akhirah, he doesn't believe in God. Those are the differences that present themselves in the Akhirah and in the hereafter. That's not the point of tonight's discussion. The question that we're trying to answer is, what are the differences between our lives today on a practical level while I'm still in this world? How is my life different from the life of someone who is not blessed with the blessing of Islam? Tonight, inshallah, we're going to delve into this topic, and in order to do so, we'll pose the following questions. Number one, how was Islam a blessing for the people of the time of the Prophet, and how did it revolutionize their lives? Number two, why was it that the Arabian Peninsula, where the Prophet emerged from, was never conquered by the other empires that existed at that time? Number three, how is Islam a blessing in our lives here in the 21st century? Number four, does Islam only offer moral teachings to us, or is the message of Islam far greater than universally agreed upon moral teachings that every human being understands? Number five, what are the practical differences between the life of an atheist and between the life of a Muslim? And number six, can someone who doesn't have Islam in his life and doesn't have faith in his life produce a moral framework for how we are to live our lives on a day-to-day basis? Inshallah, tonight we'll delve into these 6 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. This religion of Islam that most of us look at as a burden, when you go to the verses of the Quran is very clear about one thing. The Quran does not consider Islam to be a burden that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owes you because you believed in it. You and I, when we think about the faith, we think about it as something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to reward us and has to pay us because He is in debt to us. Because we believed in His messenger maybe when no one else was willing to believe in His messenger. We see it as a burden that we took on, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to come back and make it up to you and I. This is our general understanding. When you go to the Quran, what does the Quran say? The Quran says, يَمُنُّونَ عَلَيْكَ أَنْ أَسْلَمُوا. They come to you and they place minnat upon you because they accepted your message. بَلِ اللَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ. The Quran flips this equation. The Quran says, Ya Rasulullah, tell them you don't owe them anything. بَلِ اللَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ. In fact, they owe you and they owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran flips this equation, flips this scenario. بَلِ اللَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to place minnat upon you, meaning you owe Him because you believe in this religion. In other words, the Quran is saying, Islam, though it might be restrictive at times, it's not a burden for you, it's more of a blessing for you in your life than it is a burden in your life. This we understand very clearly when you look at the people of the time of the Prophet. During the time of the Prophet, the Arab that the Prophet brought his message to initially were nobodies when he brought his message to them. This was a group of people who lived in a land empty of civilization, lived in a land empty of schooling, lived in a land empty of knowledge. This was not a land that was ripe for empires and dynasties and civilizations. And this is fundamentally why you find during the time of the Prophet, none of the major empires even bothered to conquer the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Peninsula was a land so empty of any sort of value for the Roman Empire, for the Persian Empire, that neither of them made an attempt to even conquer this land. These two empires had constant fights and wars with one another. They constantly went back and forth with one another. But when it came to the Arabian Peninsula, they could care less about who owns this land. Why is that? Because it was a land empty of natural resources. It was a land empty of civilization. You compare that to Iraq that we know of today. It was a land ripe with natural resources and ripe with civilizations and so on and so forth. Yes? Therefore, the Prophet took this land that was considered nothing by these empires, unified all of the tribes within this land, and created a power to be reckoned with. If we set aside the Futuhat, which is a longer discussion, because one has to ask this question, were the Ahlul Bayt okay with the Futuhat, or were they not okay with the Futuhat? Hence we're setting aside the Futuhat. If we only go until the end of the life of the Prophet himself, when the Prophet left this world, he took this land that was empty of anything, he turned it into a power that other empires in the world now had to treat in a serious manner. So how was Islam a blessing for the people of the time of the Prophet? This was very clear. He took them from nobody to being a power in the world. But that's 1400 years ago. The question that we want to get into is, how is Islam a blessing for you and I today in the 21st century? And if we answer this question, you and I start to take pride in this religion. We start to appreciate the message of the Prophet so much more. So many of us living in this part of the world might pass by other people who don't have Islam in their lives. And many times we think to ourselves, maybe the life of this person is easier than my life. He doesn't have all these rules and regulations. He doesn't have all these restrictions. His life seems to be an easier life. And therefore you and I look at Islam, we see it as a burden, not so much as a form of a blessing. Therefore the question that comes to mind is, practically, how does Islam in the 21st century positively impact my life? And if I answer this question properly, when we walk out tonight, when we come across people who are not blessed with Islam, we will feel like they are deprived of a great blessing that you and I have been blessed with. And we start to appreciate the sacrifices that the Prophet made for us and that our sixth Imam made for us. Let us get into these differences. Imagine there's a person who doesn't believe in Islam. What is his difference with you and I who claim to embrace the religion of Islam? Most people will point to the moral teachings of Islam as one of the greatest blessings of Islam. If you ask a Muslim, how is Islam a blessing in your life? He will tell you, yes, Islam is a blessing in my life because Islam teaches me not to cheat. Islam teaches me to be fair. Islam teaches me to be kind. Islam teaches me to be truthful. And he will grant you a full list of moral guidelines that every single human being on the face of the earth agrees with. Anywhere you go in the world, if you ask them, is it good to lie or not? They're going to say no. Anywhere you go, if you ask them, should I cheat or not in this transaction? They'll say no. This is what the Muslim will respond to you. This answer is an incomplete answer. It's a very unconvincing or inconvincing answer. Why? Because you don't need to be Muslim to understand these moral guidelines. You could be a walking atheist and understand that you have to be kind to your neighbor, and understand that you cannot lie in a transaction, and understand that you cannot cheat the other person sitting on the other side of the table in an interaction that you're having with them. So this is not the point that makes Islam unique in its message. Pay attention, this is a very unique and a very nuanced discussion. If I point to the moral teachings of Islam, I say here, this is why Islam is a blessing in my life. Well, isn't it that this atheist also understands all of these moral guidelines and moral teachings? He also understands all of these. He might act on these teachings sometimes more than you and I. Isn't that true? Okay, so then what is it that Islam brought to us? The only thing that Islam brought to us was these basic moral guidelines that human beings understand on their own? Or was there more to the teachings of Islam? The answer is there was a lot more to the teachings of Islam. Yes, these moral guidelines are a big part of the message of the Prophet. There's no doubt about that. But this was not the only thing that the Prophet brought to us. This is not the only reason why Islam is the blessing in our lives that it is. Everyone understands these basic moral guidelines. So then you say, how is Islam a blessing in my life then, if it's not these things? Of course, these teachings were very important for the Prophet. When you look into the life of the Prophet 1400 years ago, his akhlaq still shines up till today. Hence, he was used to do things that people in society were unfamiliar with. People in society would consider unusual. You read in his seerah, every time the Prophet was leaving the home, he would find a body of water. And he would look into the water and he would start to prepare his appearance. When he was asked about this, Ya Rasulullah, why do you do this? He said, because when you go and meet your friends, Allah loves for you to appear in a beautiful manner. This is the akhlaq of the Prophet. This is that same akhlaq. No one was able to give salam to him before he would give salam to them first. He used to give salam to the kids even when he was in a rush. This is the akhlaq of this Prophet, yes? This is the akhlaq of that Prophet when they used to enter into the gathering. Everyone was sitting within this gathering. They couldn't tell which one of these individuals is the Prophet. Abu Dhar says, when we used to come and sit with the Prophet, we couldn't actually tell who is the Prophet. When people used to come from outside, they hadn't met the Prophet yet, they used to ask us, which one of you is Muhammad? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When an ill man entered into the gathering, he had skin that was scarred. And wherever he sat in the gathering, people used to get up. What did the Prophet do? He went and took his hand and brought him and sat him beside himself. This is that akhlaq of the Prophet. The akhlaq of the Prophet was when someone entrusted him with something, with an amana, he always returned it. He used to tell his companions, Addul amana, return the trust of people, even if it's a needle and a thread. All of these akhlaqi teachings are definitely part of Islam. There's no doubt about it. That's why when we hear about this 1400 years later, the love of the Prophet still in our hearts starts to bubble up a little bit. Yes, we appreciate the akhlaq of the Prophet. But this is not the only thing that the Prophet came to bring to you and I. There is a big difference. Remember this line. There is a big difference between emphasizing the moral teachings in Islam and confining Islam only to moral teachings. Big difference. Confining Islam only to basic moral teachings is a big disservice to Islam, because you're getting rid of two other categories of the teachings of Islam. These are important, these are part of Islam, but Islam came to give us more. So what else, you say, did Islam come to give us? Islam came to give you, number one, a belief system, and number two, day-to-day regulations and rules on how to run your day-to-day life. These two, your aqaid and your ahkam, were also part of the teachings of Islam, not just the moral teachings. So you say, how do those two positively impact my life today when I look at the life of an atheist? If he has good akhlaq and I have good akhlaq too. Your belief system, though, impacts you in a way that this atheist is deprived of. And four of those differences, tonight, inshallah, we're going to get into. Aloud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. The first of those differences is this. If you don't have faith in your life, if you don't have Islam in your life, you can never look at this world and claim that this world has a purpose and meaning and wisdom behind it. You live a meaningless life. The world we live in is a chaotic life. If you pick up your phone any morning for 5 minutes on social media, you'll see all the terrible things that are happening in the world. Here, there's an earthquake. Over there, someone passed away. Over here, these people's rights are being taken away from them. It's a chaotic world, yes? As a believer, because you are blessed with the blessing of Islam, you can walk away always knowing there's a purpose behind all of this. At the end of the day, you can stay sane in a chaotic world. Because you recite Surah Al-Fatiha. In Surah Al-Fatiha, what do we read? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You all praise belongs to Allah, the one who is the nurturer of the worlds or the inhabitants of the worlds. So you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a part of every step of this process. But that's only because you have Islam and faith in your life. if you don't have Islam and faith in your life, what's the purpose behind all these difficulties and injustices and the darknesses that we see in life these days? There is none. There's no meaning to this life at all. This is why when you ask an atheist, what is the purpose behind life? What's the meaning behind life? The answers that you will get was something like this. They'll tell you, the purpose behind life is that so that you can explore to see what brings you pleasure in this world. It's a very superficial understanding of what life is all about. But you're a Muslim, you understand there's purpose and meaning behind the life that you go through. This is the first of those differences. We're going to move on to number 2. A loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Number 2, you know as a Muslim, you have this blessing in your life. You know what happens to you after you die. You can only know this through faith. Every human being grapples with this question. What's going to happen to me after I leave this world? Human beings are worried about what's going to happen to them in the next couple of years, let alone the next hundreds or thousands of years that's going to come after this life. You as a Muslim have a clear picture of what's going to happen after you leave this world. But that is only because you are blessed with the blessing of Islam and you are blessed with the blessing of faith. If you don't have this faith in your life, what happens to you after you die? I have no idea. Am I going to be in ease or am I going to be in pain? We don't know. Is it going to be like a dream? Is it going to be like a coma? Am I going to go to sleep for thousands of years? Does everything just come to an end? We don't know. This is a question every single human being has. And the only way to be able to answer it is through faith. It's through religion. So this person, if you ask him, what's going to happen after I die? He doesn't have an answer for you. But you as a believer, you have an answer to this question. You know exactly what's going to happen. I'll share a story with you just to put this into perspective. Yes, a number of years ago, I got a call from another one of the communities. They said they wanted to hold a majlis tarhim, yes, a isal thawab majlis, yes. So naturally, this person has passed away. I asked in discussing the majlis with the family, I asked the person who passed away, how old was he? I was assuming the number I was going to hear is going to be a very high number. The answer I heard was that this person who passed away was 12 years of age. 12. You can imagine how difficult it is. Now, I don't want to go into all the details because tonight's Eid. I don't want to make you guys sad on a night like this. 12 years old. Shocked. So I had a conversation with the father. Speaking to the father in the conversation he was having with me, going through a very difficult time. He said, you know what makes it so difficult for me, Shaykh? I said, what is it? He said, I know my son wasn't a bad person. He's 12. He's not even baligh yet, yes? Inshallah, he's in a good place. He said, my problem is I've been taking care of this child my whole life. But this child's not around anymore. I just want to know he's in good hands. If you're a father or a mother, you know exactly what this feeling is like. If you've been taking care of your kids your whole life and the kids aren't around anymore, your heart, you need someone to calm it down. You need someone to give you some tranquility. What's happening to my child right now? Is he in ease? Is he in pain? What's happening to him? I shared with him a narration that hopefully brought him a little bit of ease. This narration is from Al-Kafi, volume number 3. The 6th Imam is asked about the moments when a believer is taken from this world. All these details you only have because of the blessing of Islam. Yes, remember this. The Imam is asked, he said, هَلْ يُكْرَهُ الْمُؤْمِنُ عَلَى قَبْضِ رُوحِهِ? Is a believer anytime forced for his soul to be taken from him? The 6th Imam responded, La wallah, that never happens. So naturally, the Rawi had the same question that many of you and I have. What do you mean he's never forced? There's a lot of people, they don't want to leave this world. They're good people. At the end of the day, they leave this world. So what happens to them? So the 6th Imam started to explain. He said, إِنَّهُ إِذَا أَتَاهُ مَلَكُ الْمَوْتِ. When the angel of death comes, جَزِعَ عِنْدَ ذَلِكَ. This person, he starts to get worried when he sees Malikul Maut coming, yes? But Malikul Maut himself becomes a means of comfort for him. So Malikul Maut turns to him and says to him, Ya waliyallah, la tajza'. O friend of Allah, you have nothing to worry about. Your journey is going to be an easy journey. فَوَالَّذِي بَعَثَ مُحَمَّدًا صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ اللهم صل على محمد. Malikul Maut says, by the one who sent Muhammad as his messenger, لَأَنَا أَبَرُّ بِكَ. I'm going to be kinder to you. وَأَشْفَقُ عَلَيْكَ. And nicer to you min walidin rahim. From your own parents. Then he turns to him, he says, Iftah aynayk, open your eyes. Fandur, take a look. What does this person see when he opens his eyes? وَيُمَثَّلُ لَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. The messenger of God is what he sees. وَأَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَفَاطِمَةَ وَالْحَسَنُ وَالْحُسَيْنُ وَذُرِّيَّتِهِمْ. Salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajal farajahum. What does he see? He sees these individuals waiting for him. Malikul Maut turns towards him. He says, listen, this is what's waiting for you. Do you want to join them or do you want to go back? So the narration says, فَمَا مِن شَيْءٍ أَحَبُّ إِلَيْهِ. There's nothing more beloved to him in those moments. مِن إِسْتِلَالِ رُوحِهِ. He wants to give up his soul with his own will, voluntarily. وَاللُّحُوقِ بِالْمُنَادِ. He wants to join the angel and head out of this world. You know what happens after you die. That is because of the blessing of faith in your life. But now you ask an atheist, they ask Christopher Hitchens this question, yes, this famous atheist, one of the four horsemen as they used to call themselves. They said, if you're the one sitting by the deathbed of a person and you're holding his hand and he's taking his final breaths of his life, what are you going to tell him to bring comfort to him in those moments? He smiled. He said, I probably shouldn't be the one holding his hand in those moments because I have no words of comfort to share with him. You have this because you have the blessing of faith in your life. Yes, this is number 2. Number 3, as a believer, you know your efforts never go unnoticed. When you do the right thing and there is no one to appreciate it, no one even cares that you did the right thing, you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching. You know there's someone who's taking notes. You know there's someone who is taking notice of your deeds. Why do you think society has turned into this individualistic society that we have today? Where no one is willing to compromise. No one is willing to sacrifice. Why should I sacrifice? Who's going to come and give me an award anyways? But you have the blessing of faith in your life. That means everything you do, you know there is someone who is taking notice for it. So you come home, your spouse, your child says something to you that isn't the most disrespectful thing. You get angry, you want to yell back at them, but because they're your loved one, you hold back, you do the right thing. Does anyone come to give you an award? Does anyone come to give you a cash prize? Does anyone come to give you any of the prizes that hopefully you guys are going to win on a night like this? Yes? Is it PS5? Does anyone walk up to you and say, this PS5 is yours because you did the right thing? No, nobody cares. But because you have the blessing of faith in your life, you know none of your efforts go unnoticed. This is why Luqman told his son, Ya bunayya, innaha in taku mithqala habbatin min khardalin. If it's an atom size of a deed that you did, fatakun fi sakhratin, you did it in the middle of nowhere, aw fi samawati aw fil ard, ya'ti biha Allah, God will bring that deed for you. He will make it present for you on the day of judgment. Only because you have the blessing of faith in your life. Otherwise, without it, why should I do the right thing? Who's keeping count anyways? Who's going to notice anyways? This is number 3. Bringing us to number 4, the final of these items. Aloud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The fourth of these is that when you're in difficulty and in pain, you have someone to rely on for comfort and for support. When that moment in life comes, and inevitably it's going to come for all of us at one point or another, where everyone else isolates you. Everyone else moves on with their life. Sometimes even people who you really trusted, they carry on with life. They move on. It's you and your difficulties. You as a believer know that you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by your side, but only because you have faith. Only because you're blessed with this blessing. If you don't have this faith and blessing in your life, it's a very lonely life. Because people aren't always going to be there for you and I. There's going to come times where people are going to walk away. They're going to leave you to yourself. It's just you. But I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there with me. This is why the Prophet said this in his wasiyah to the first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He said, Ya Ali, aninul marid tasbihun. He said, when the ill whimpers in the middle of the night, I am writing down tasbih for him. When everyone else has moved on with their life, they're sleeping, they don't even care about this person. The Prophet said, aninul marid tasbihun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala witnesses him and is writing down worship for this person that's ill. No one cares about him. وَسِيَاحُهُ تَهْلِيلٌ. And when he cries out of pain in the middle of the night, I'm writing down that he said, La ilaha illallah. وَنَوْمُهُ عَلَى الْفِرَاشِ عِبَادَةٌ. When he sleeps on the bed while he's ill, I consider this ibadah for him. وَتَقَلُّبُهُ وَجْهًا إِلَى وَجْهٍ. And when he's sleeping and flipping from one side to the other side, what do I write for him? فَكَأَنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ. It's like he's defending Islam. When everyone else turns away, you know you have someone that is there for you. And hence you find this beautiful narration that Shaykh As-Saduq has narrated in 3 separate books of his, in which Musa spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, Ya Rabbi, أَبَعِيدٌ أَنْتَ فَأُنَادِيَكَ. Are you far from me so I should do nida towards you, I should call you? أَمْ قَرِيبٌ فَأُنَاجِيَكَ. Or are you close to me so I should whisper to you? Which one is it? فَأَوْحَى اللَّهُ إِلَى Musa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to Musa, O Musa, أَنَا جَلِيسُ مَنْ ذَكَرَنِي. The one who remembers me, I'm right there with him. Only because you have the blessing of faith in your life. Without the blessing of faith, none of this is going to make sense. That is why the Prophet has a very beautiful narration that's been attributed to him. When he was asked, Ayn Allah, where is God? Normally when the Ahlul Bayt are asked this question, the response you hear from them is, don't ask this question. God is the one who made place and time. Therefore he himself doesn't have place and time. This is the normal response you get from them. This time the Prophet responded from a different angle. When he was asked, Su'ila Ayn Allah, where is God? He said, عِنْدَ الْمُنْكَسِرَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. He is with those whose hearts are broken. This person is going through difficulty, he has regrets, pain, whatever the case. That is where you can find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But all of this is only because you have the blessing of faith in your life. Yes? Therefore, the belief system of Islam is a blessing, brothers and sisters, for us. This is as it relates to the belief system. Coming to the final point, the day-to-day rules and regulations that we have in Islam, the ahkam that we have in Islam, how do these positively impact our lives today? That someone else who doesn't have Islam in their life is deprived of. The way these impact our lives is the following. Everyone can agree on basic moral concepts, but the question is, where do you draw the line? Everyone agrees charity is a good thing, but to what extent and how much and in what way? Everyone agrees your loved ones have rights upon you, but to what extent, in what way? Everyone agrees modesty is generally a good thing, but how do we define modesty? What does it mean on a practical level? You don't know the answer to any of these questions without Islam. But if I have Islam in my life, then I have the blessing of knowing the answers to these questions. And this is why atheists for the longest time have struggled with the answer to this question. If I don't have religion in my life, how can I come up with a set of rules of do's and don'ts? And so they make attempts to try to come up with a way where they can come up with a moral framework for the human being. And hence you find Sam Harris, another one of the 4 horsemen, wrote a book called The Moral Landscape. And the claim in the book was what? That science can come up with a moral framework for us and tell us exactly what to do and what not to do. How so? The following is the theory. This is the summary of the book, yes? His theory was we will have science get data on how much happiness a particular action brings into your life. If it brings a lot of happiness in your life, this is a very good thing to do. If it doesn't bring a lot of happiness into your life, this is not important. You can set it aside. This was his theory. What he lost in this whole theory is that you and I don't have that knowledge to be able to measure happiness. You and I don't even have the knowledge to define what happiness is. Who has that knowledge? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that knowledge. But the problem is someone like him doesn't want to go and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that knowledge, yes? Hence he came up with this theory that science can provide this to you. Science can't tell us what happiness is. Science can't tell us how we measure happiness. Who can tell us this? The Messenger of Allah, the one who brought us this message, that is our Prophet, and the one who preserved this message, that is our sixth Imam. That is why whenever we remember our Holy Prophet and our sixth Imam, we always say these lines. And inshallah, with this dua, we bring tonight's talk to an end. As the people in heaven say, we also say for the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Alhamdulillahi alladhi hadana lihada. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He guided us to this blessing. وَمَا كُنَّا لِنَهْتَدِيَ لَوْلَا أَنْ هَدَانَ اللَّهُ. For it was not for His blessing, we would not have been guided to the blessing of Islam. For all of yourselves and your families on this auspicious occasion, the birth of these two special characters, for all of those who worked hard to put this majlis together, and for all of those who gave from their time and their effort and their energy to make it possible, 3 loud salawats.